Yo, Lord Willin, Jeff Canarsie, Mob Talk Radio. Check it out. Yo, we stay quiet like Russell Buffalino when things will get ugly like Pesci's death in Casino. Who do we know? No one, nobody. But we're all well respected like Della Croce and Gotti. I know wild nights, Havana nocturne. Light up a cigar and watch your spot burn. You'll get patty whacked, I'm tough like Irish dock workers. Rubber guys with guys, hooligans and block lurkers. Corner berserkers, street savvy soldiers. You owe, you better pay. Don't make me say I told you. Code you don't betray, I say what I mean. Providence and Brooklyn all the way to the Bean. I'd rather be unseen, like Vinny the Chin. I don't gotta go to Vegas to see cities of sin. Pull the pin, drop bombs like Danny Green. I write homicide like the murder machine. Lansky Luciano, mastermind the racket. Up in the clam house with $1 million in my jacket. Move around when the streets get darker. Pay homage to real bosses like Gambino and Patriarcha.
I'm going to tell you something. If you two never bother me again the rest of my life, I ain't giving up that stuff. I can't. There's good friends of mine out of the say. Well, he's divorced, you have to do it tough. That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what the money is. Because also means that the boss is your boss.
Hey, welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Canarsie. If you are new to this station, do me a favor. Please hit the like. Please hit the subscribe. And per the usual, always share the show if you can. We have a bit of news today. And I've known about this for a little bit, but I've been trying to kind of hold back because I wanted to get some confirmation. And so today, we are going to be talking about Frank Cali just a little bit. There has been some stuff that has come to light. And this is not clickbait title at all whatsoever. So I'm going to share this really quick. Okay. So what we basically have is the Frank Cali murder case is over with. And it's not what you expect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit through Frank Cali today. Not a deep dive, any stretch of the imagination, but we're going to give you sort of the update. So on March 13th, 2019, Francesco Cali, alleged boss of the Gambino crime family, was killed outside of his home. It was a bit of a media fiasco, both with the press and the NYPD, and the FBI essentially came out publicly and blamed Gene Gotti for that assassination. And all of those rumors turned out to be completely junk, as we know. And it was just another way for the FBI to harass the Gottis, especially after Gene Gotti exited prison after 30 years. Frank Cali at the time was alleged to be the boss of the Gambino crime family, and through marriage was related to the Inzerillo crime family. And Frank Cali's roots went back to Sicily, and he was mentioned numerous times within the pizza connection back in the old days, but nothing was ever sort of corroborated. And the only link that the FBI could prove at any point was his link to Domenico Adamita, who was directly associated with Gaetano Badalamenti. Cali also, like we said, was related to the Inzerillos through marriage. And as you know, historically, Totorina had kicked the Inzerillos out of Sicily under the penalty of death. But his roots went even further than that. Cali was also the nephew-in-law of John Gambino, the nephew of John Bonaventure and Vito Bonaventure. So to say that Frank Cali didn't have serious pedigree would be a massive overstatement, understatement. Cali's stomping grounds was 18th Avenue. He was known as a serious moneymaker and a very low-key guy, would end up being promoted to captain under Jackie D'Amico. Cali then slowly begins his rise and quickly becomes a huge moneymaker for the Gambino crime family, and would go on to control all of the fruit produce in the city under the Circus Fruits wholesale. And then that would lead to the purchase of Ferraro Foods, which is an Italian food distribution company which serves over 10,000 customers in 26 different states. And it is a multi-billion-dollar company. And it's not the first time that we've seen mob bosses control major industry distributors. Carlo Gambino, for example, former head of the Gambino crime family, controlled Ferraro Foods. through the Liberty Food Group. And I believe it was in 2000, I want to say 11 or maybe 2001, that was sort of exposed. But Frank Cali was, also considered a boss in Sicily. Wiretaps would catch Sicilian members calling Frank Cali the boss. Cali would even attend, allegedly, mob-making ceremonies in Sicily. And what made Cali different was that he had his own wing of members who were cross-Atlantic. And it's also worth noting that Cali was inducted into the Mafia in Sicily as well. Cali, like we said, was a low-key guy. He was only arrested once for racketeering in 2008, and he was arrested with 60-some others in something called Operation Old Bridge, which focused heavily on drug trafficking from Sicily back to New York City through the Gambino crime family specifically. Cali allegedly was the acting go-between the Sicilian gangsters in Palermo and the Gambinos back here in New York. He was also a lot like John Gambino, his uncle-in-law, in that respect, but he was a lot more low-key. In June of 2008, Cali would plead out to racketeering and only end up doing 10 months in prison, and that was the last time that Frank Cali ever had any law enforcement interactions. In 2012, it's been said that Cali became the acting underboss for the Gambino crime family, and it was only a temporary position because many misreported that Domenico Cephalou had taken over the crime family. But that's actually not the case. Cephalou was a front boss for the Gambinos, nothing more, nothing less. And many speculated that Cali took over the reins in 2012. In fact, Cali, as far as I'm concerned, took over and made Domenico Cephalou the front boss, and then John Gambino became the acting street boss. And this way, Cali could adequately insulate himself from the authorities. So I want to pull this photo up really quick, and we will keep going. Let me just pull this up. Okie dokie. Let me go back to here. So Cali becomes really the first transcontinental mob boss in the history of American Cosa Nostra. Law enforcement tried in vain for years to nail Cali, but couldn't. In fact, when you look at his, through the Freedom of Information Act, when you look at his FBI file and you look at the notes that were made, there is so much that's redacted that you can't even really distinguish much. But the FBI, like I said, tried to nail Cali for a long time, but couldn't because he was like a ghost. There were only 2 surveillance photos in 25 years of Frank Cali, and those went back to the 1990s. Under Frank Cali, the Gambinos would revert back to the Sicilian roots of organized crime, and the Gambinos really took a step back publicly. And as we know, on March 13th of 2019, Anthony Comello, a QAnon nut who believed he was helping Donald Trump, drove to Staten Island. And what a lot of people don't know is prior to this, Anthony Comello was stalking the daughter of a made guy within the DeCavalcante crime family. The father, who I'm not going to name, ended up chasing him off. Comello then began to stalk Frank Cali's niece. And this was the second time that Comello was stalking a girl who was related to organized crime guys. This is something that Comello did. So Comello drives to Staten Island and he rams the back of Frank Cali's car, which I believe was a white Escalade. Cali came outside to confront Comello, whom he had tried to chase away many times prior to that. And he had warned him many times prior to that to stay away from his niece. And Comello pulled out a 9mm gun and shot Cali to death in front of his own house with his children not 200 feet away. And Cali was shot 10 times. Cali would be rushed to the hospital, but tragically passed away at 53 years old. 3 days later, Anthony Comello will be arrested for that murder. And as the investigation sort of moved along, Comello tried, and he played that batshit crazy card, writing MAGA on his hand, QAnon on his hand, and uttering oddball QAnon theories in court. And after seeing multiple shrinks, the court would deem him not fit to stand trial. And that's all we've known since 2019 until now. And a lot of you over the years have asked me about that situation because I, like many of you, had believed Comello was a dead man walking. Like the second he gets into prison, that's going to be it for him, right? But here's what's interesting. Back in May, and I believe it was last year, I may be having the date wrong here, but it was in May, I believe, of last year, his family's home was almost burned to the ground. And see, shortly after Comello's arrest, his family was living in New Jersey. They fled New Jersey in fear. And in May of last year, they got a new home and someone tried to burn it to the ground. FBI and the ATF investigated and found it to be suspicious. And they found accelerants and other devices, which sort of showed them that somebody was trying to burn that house to the ground. Nothing really ever came of that investigation. And then I've heard that the Comello family has fled once again out of fear, and rightfully so. And so, as I said, many have asked me what happened with that case. And what I have said publicly, because I didn't know anymore prior till the last couple of days, is that typically when somebody's found to be mentally incompetent or insane or not fit to stand trial, technically they're shipped off to a mental ward. And then usually within 3 to 4 years, they, through medication and therapy and et cetera, they're found to be mentally competent, and then the trial goes on. And through sources, what I can tell you that the FBI and prosecution have sealed that case entirely. Not only is the case over with, it's done, but there was already a trial and a conviction from what I understand. It's over with. And we're never going to know what happened, why it happened, because the FBI has completely sealed it. Like I said, I've been told the case is over with and has been for a very long time. And the reason, obviously, why it was sealed was to protect Comello from harm. I was also told he's never, ever going to be placed into a regular prison either, out of fear that he will be murdered. And I believe I would go along with that log line. I don't think it's a stretch to say that that wouldn't be the case. And from what I understand, he is in New York at a mental facility where he's going to spend the rest of his life. So there won't be, according to my sources and according to newly released information and some articles that have come out, there's not going to be a court hearing. It's done. It's over with. And while I totally disagree with him being able to spend his days drooling and playing volleyball with the other fucking nuts, there is kind of something I do want to say. He's not nuts. I've never thought he was nuts. And you have to look at how this murder was committed. This is not a murder that was committed with somebody that was insane, not somebody who's mentally inferior. It's someone who was very calculating and very premeditated. And you just have to look at how it happened. You ram the back of a car, the guy comes out, and you just start shooting him the second he gets near the car. That's premeditated. That is not somebody who's a fucking nut. But as we see in a lot of cases, people act crazy so they don't have to go to prison. And that's what I believe. I don't think this kid's nuts at all. Some will say, well, to murder somebody, you got to be off anyway. Well, I would agree with that too. But the injustice of it all, I mean, the Cali and the Inzerillo family are never going to get the justice. And we have to determine what is justice. And in my opinion, good, bad, and indifferent, put him in general population and let the prisoners handle him. That's justice. That's justice, whether you like it or not. I'm a firm believer in an eye for an eye kind of deal. And so for anybody that was wondering if anything was ever going to come of this case, it's done and it's over with. It's done and over with. He's going to be like Hinckley and all of these other people that shot presidents that they say are nuts. Sometimes people aren't nuts. They just don't give a fuck. But there is a patterned history of Comello stalking girls that are related to organized crime guys. And the Cali family is never going to get any justice because justice is being able to see him convicted in court. And it's not going to happen because it's over with. And so for the rest of his life, he'll sit looking out a window, taking pills every 2 hours, and nothing will ever happen to him. And I'm not saying that the arson job or the attempted arson job had anything to do with anybody. But I don't believe in coincidences either. So that's the news. That's what's going on. You will not hear another thing about Comello. It's done and over with. And they sealed it. And they sealed it to protect him. And it's always amazing to me how the Justice Department protects the perpetrators and doesn't protect the victims or their families. That's just how this goes. So that's going to be it. We will be back on later this week with a live show where we can discuss this. In the meantime, you can check us out on Facebook, Mob Talk Radio. You can check us out at mobtalkradioshow.supercast.com for our award-winning podcast. Or you can email the show at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com with all your questions. All that being said, we'll see everybody in a few days.